Well, hey, as we jump into this series for the love, or the last week of this series for the love, I want to ask you a question, and this will resonate with some of you, and it will not resonate with all of you. But have you ever, thinking of impulse buys, have you ever been trapped in a store with a child who had $5 to his or her name and was desperate to spend it? And I hear the groans from every fellow parent in the room, right? Some of you, you don't know, so let me inform you a little bit. Okay, $5 is the magic number, okay? $5 is just enough for a young child to think that they have enough money to buy something, but not quite enough money to actually buy something. You know what I'm saying? So when my daughter was 3 years old, okay, she received a card in the mail from her grandparent, with $5 in it, which, by the way, grandparents have not adjusted for inflation. Like that. Like one thing that is inflation proof is cards from grandparents, So she gets $5, and she is just desperate to spend this money. She's 3 years old, you know what I mean? She's just desperate to spend this money. She keeps asking, when can we go to the store so I can spend my $5? When can we go to the store so I can spend my $5? And I just decided, that I was going to take this as an opportunity to offer to her a lesson in saving, And so I told my wife, I said, here's what I'm going to do. I said, this is so good. This is going to work. I said, I'm going to take her to the Walmart. I'm going to show her all the things she could buy if she saved her money. She's going to be convinced. She's going to have a savings goal. She's going to come home. She's going to save up her money. I'm even going to tell her for every week that she doesn't spend her money, I'll give her an extra $1. You know what I mean? Like, it'll accrue. So I'm like, this is what's going to work. So we get to Walmart. And I definitely overestimated the prefrontal cortex of my 3-year-old in that moment. And now I find myself in a store with a kid who I realize doesn't know how to read a price tag. So we're going from thing to thing. Dad, how much does this cost? $80. How much does this cost? $75, you know what I mean? And she's like, can I buy this? Can I buy this? And she's looking at all these things. And I'm, meanwhile, between these things, trying to convince her, can you imagine if you saved up your money for 13 years to buy that Barbie dream house, And she's going, she doesn't know numbers. She's like, Dad, she's like, I found it. This Barbie Jeep is $5. I'm like, sweetie, that's $50. How much more till I'll have $50? Like, how much more do I need? There's just no context for this. And I'm still just trying to, I'm almost pleading at this point, hey, could we just save our money? Now, some of you by this point would just give in. At some point you just go, you know what, I'm going to throw in an extra 10 just to get me out of here. I'm stubborn. I'm not falling for that. And so she goes around and she finally finds the one thing in the Walmart toy section that she can buy for $5. And as soon as she laid eyes on this thing, she had to have it. She could not go home with it. I pleaded, I begged her to not buy this thing. I'm like, she's like, no, I need it. I'm going to play with it every day. I'm going to see it every day. She had to have it. You want to see what it was? Here's what she got for $5. The most knockoff Mickey Mouse you've ever seen, but here's the deal. It stretches. And by the time she got to it, about 50 kids had found it first. You know what I mean? He was a little bit, kind of elongated. I don't know what happened to the back of his head. Like Mickey had brain surgery right after he got out of prison, So, I don't know. But she had to have it the moment she had money. She had to do something to spend it. Now, here's the thing with this. You and I, and you already know this, you and I are not all that much different, right? Like for most of us, the moment that you get just a little bit of extra money, your mind is already thinking of all of the ways that you could spend and use that extra money. In fact, some of you, your Amazon card is like full before your paycheck even hits the bank. You know what I'm saying? Some of us, right, as soon as we file our taxes, what you see, what that refund amount's going to be, and before it hits the bank account, you're already making plans with what you can do with it, right? Some of us, even Christmas comes around, you know what I mean? And the first thing we start doing, and some of us have already done this, I've actually already done this, to be honest, right? We start making a list, and the first list you make is not the list of the things that you could buy for other people. The first thing you do is start making a list of all the things that other people could buy for you. Like it's just our way of spending someone else's money for us once a year, right? Like and the reality is, if you think about it, right, at the core of us, all of us in some way, shape, or form, in one area or another area, right, all of us have some desire for more and better, right? This is why we buy new iPhones before the old iPhone stops working. This is why so many of us trade in a decently good car for the sake of a better car. This is how Goodwill stays in business, you know? Like Goodwill stays in business by taking your older and worse and turning it into somebody else's more and better as you trade up for more and better, right? Now, this is how our attics get massively full. Our garages are busting to the seams to the point that our cars don't even fit in them, you know? This is how our closets are just like spilling with more and more and more. We have innately just this desire for more and better. And Mr. Savers in the room, I mean, don't get all high and mighty right now because you're just as guilty, just in a different way. Where are my savers at? All right? I know because I'm one of you, right? Some of us, we go like, oh, it's not me because I save. But for most of us, at least, when we save, we're saving for what? A goal. We're saving for vacation. We're saving for cars. We're saving for stuff. And so you're just like, we might be like delaying gratification, but we're still saving for gratification. And really, we're saving for some version of more and better. Even our emergency funds are designed to protect what for us? The more and the better that we already have. Right? I mean, like if you ever developed an emergency fund, and I'm a big proponent of emergency funds, but when you sat down to figure out your emergency fund, what you probably did was say, hey, if I lost my job tomorrow, how much do I make? How long would it take me to get a new job? And what would it take for me financially to be able to protect all the more and better that I've designed and developed and curated in my life until the point that I could replace that income, right? We build our lives around more and better. And let me say this doesn't make you a bad person. This just makes you a really good American. Because we live in a world and in a culture that actually over and over again reinforces us that more is better. In fact, just for fun, I mean, there's so many ways that we could talk about this, but just for fun, let's kind of take almost like this experiment that kind of took place, or almost like a case study that took place in our country a couple of years ago. All right, so back in 2020, the federal government released $271 billion in stimulus checks. Many of us, probably most of us, remember receiving those checks. Okay, $271 billion in stimulus checks. And hear me, those stimulus checks in so many ways went towards really important and really good things. For many people, they provided food. For many people, they provided rent and provided for their mortgage. For many people, it provided clothing. For many people, it provided so many essential things, right? And also, they were designed to inject additional funds into the economy to stimulate the economy. And they did. So during the period of 2020, while all that money is injected in the economy, here's some of the few things that took place, okay? Home Depot sales increased by 24%. Lowe's sales increased by 20%. RV sales increased by 6%. Boat sales increased by 12%. Charitable giving increased by 2%. Now, hear me. I'm not saying that's your story. I'm just saying that that's the story that you're surrounded with day after day after day. And I'm just saying that that's a window into the culture that you and I find ourselves living in. In fact, we might just say it this way, that we are surrounded by a culture of consumption that's driven by one thing, desire. A culture that says, I want it, so I should have it. A culture that doesn't understand the difference between wants and needs. A culture that says, if it seems best, it must be best for me. And quite honestly, a culture that is in many ways at odds with or the opposite of what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks in our series. Now, here's the thing about culture. Anytime you find yourself within one, and you always find yourself within one, when it comes to culture, you and I are either cognizant of it or we unintentionally begin to conform to it. We're either fully aware of it or we slowly begin to adopt it and adapt to it. We either understand and think about it and process it and maintain awareness, or we simply become more like it. Now, over the last couple of weeks in our series, For the Love, we've been talking specifically about a letter that was written by a man named John to some of the earliest Christians who found themselves in a culture of their own. They found themselves in the Roman Empire that held a set of values that were vastly different than the values that sat at the heart of this new, young movement of Christianity. And John was writing to these new Christians and talking to them about the ways that they ought to interact with the world around them and the relationship they ought to have or not have with the culture that they were surrounded by. And at the heart of everything that John wrote to them about, at the heart of how they ought to interact and act and behave and live within this culture, at the heart of all of it, as we found, was this idea of love. Today, we're going to jump into the second chapter of John's letter. And in the second chapter, he says something that, honestly, if you've been with us for the last few weeks, is going to sound really familiar because it actually might even sound like something we've already read before, but it's not something we've read before. It's just that John, throughout this letter, keeps hitting the same theme over and over and over again as if it was the kind of thing that was easily forgotten. And in the second chapter of his letter, John says to these people, these early Christians, he says, "Dear friends, I'm not writing a new commandment for you. Rather, it is an old one that you have had from the very beginning." Now, when he says this, he's actually writing to Jewish Christians. And he says this, he says, "You've had this from the very beginning." He's referring back to their earliest scriptures, the Jewish people's earliest scriptures, what many of us know now as the Old Testament within our Bibles. And saying, hey, from the very beginning of God's conversations and interactions with man has been this idea. The core of all of it has been this one thing, this commandment. He says it's not an old commandment. He says not a new commandment. He says this old commandment, to love one another, is the same message you heard before. It's always been there. But then he adds, yet it is also new. Like it's an old commandment, but it's taken on a new meaning because of what had happened recently at this time to inspire the movement of Christianity. He says Jesus lived the truth of this commandment. Everything that Jesus did was motivated by this commandment to love. Jesus didn't just teach it. Jesus didn't just talk about it. Jesus didn't just read it. He lived it. He says, and you also are living it. As if to say, hey, Jesus' life wasn't meant to just be an outlier. It was meant to be the example, and you are now following in the example of that. And then he expounds on this idea for a few lines. And then he begins to recognize that they live in a different culture, a culture that's different from the ways that Jesus had modeled for them, a culture that pushes them in a different direction and naturally begins to capture their hearts if they're not intentional. And then John takes a moment to respond to that culture, and he tells these earliest Christians, it's interesting, he tells them not what to love. He tells them what not to love. He says this, he says, do not love this world, nor the things it offers you. In other words, you're surrounded by an ecosystem with incredibly different values that's constantly offering you more and better, constantly offering you different things. He says, don't fall in love with that. He says, for when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you. There's no room for both. There's no room for those values and these values. There's no room for what the world loves and what your Heavenly Father loves. Now, we want to believe that there's room for both, right? And we want to believe that I can take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. We want to believe that we can keep one foot in and one foot in another space, right? But John's like, no. These are polar opposites of each other. This isn't a Venn diagram. These are on completely different planes because of what they offer. He says, for the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and pride in our achievements and possessions, right? Now, today, John would just kind of say it like this. You know how you say sometimes, hey, I'm just going to go for a walk around Target? Or like, hey, I'm just going to go walk around Menards and see what they have. Or I'm just going to pop on Facebook Marketplace and just kind of see what's out there. Or I'm just going to go to the boat show. I'm not going to buy anything. I just want to go see and check out the new models. Right? It's like John would say to us, hey, you might not be buying anything in that moment, but what's actually happening within you is you're developing a craving for things. There's only one way to satisfy that craving ultimately: a purchase. I mean, you could just steal it. One way or another, right? The only way to satisfy a craving is by having. And then the day that you ultimately have it, you're not done either, because you got to show it off, right? You got to put on the new dress and go out and hope that somebody notices it. Or the moment that somebody shows up at the house, you got to show them, hey, let me show you the new bathroom that I just put in. Right? The moment that you have it, now you have pride in it. And now you have to show it off as well. And John's like, hey, listen. Every time that you let your eyes grow wider for these kinds of things, it's actually doing something in your heart. And John just wants to be incredibly clear with them, and I think with us as well. He says, these things are not from the Father, but are from this world. Now, don't misunderstand me. Hear me real quick. John's not saying that God is never going to bless you with good things. That's not what he's saying. What John is saying is that God is never going to give you an insatiable craving for things. But we live in a world that fosters those kinds of cravings, don't we? A world that fosters cravings with every commercial, with every ad, with every trip to the mailbox, with every sale that shows up in your inbox, you know? A world that's constantly putting things in front of us and telling us that we ought to yearn for it, long for it, crave it, desire it. And John's like, hey, don't mistake that. And don't be ignorant of that fact. And then he gives us a warning about the world. He says, hey, this world is fading away along with everything that people crave. It's all fading away. Now, if you've ever moved a parent or a grandparent out of their house, you already know this, but the reality is someday someone is going to move you out of your house. And all of that stuff that you once craved, they're going to look at it and they're going to go, why did they ever buy that? And they're going to take it to Goodwill or straight to the dump. And all of those best clothes that were stuffed in your closet are going to end up in a thrift store. And that camper or that boat that's now just rusting out is going to be scrapped at the junkyard or dismantled for parts. Even the house that you're in, that right now is appreciating so well, one day will be torn down by someone to make room for something else. All of it at some point is fading away. But John says, listen, anyone who does what pleases God will live forever. In other words, you want to make a lasting impact? You want to do something and leave something that lasts beyond you? The kind of thing that people don't want to get rid of? It comes by craving the things that God desires. We're trading our cravings for possessions and stuff, for the things that are at the heart of our Heavenly Father. And John says over and over and over again, at the heart of our Heavenly Father is one thing: love. But here's the challenge, right? Here's the challenge for today. That craving and loving cannot coexist. Why? Because our craving for stuff and our love for other people actually both flow from the same place: our hearts. And we can't simultaneously crave things for us and also show love to others. In fact, John told us a couple of weeks ago in his letter, some of you remember this, that God is one thing, and the very essence of God is one thing: love. It's the idea that all love flows from God. And so when we actually crave things and put our attention on things, what we're actually doing is taking the love that our Heavenly Father has given to us, love that was meant to flow through us to other people, and we're then in that moment redirecting that love back to us. And you can't simultaneously crave something and love someone at the same time. Now, can we talk about this like in real talk for just a minute? Is that okay? This is why the health of marriages in our country continues to decline. Because what happens is at least one person steps into a relationship, and they operate from a craving. And you can't simultaneously love and crave at the same time. In fact, if you're married or even in a serious relationship, just about, like almost, I'm going to say 99% of the arguments that you experience in your relationship have this at the center of them. At least one person is chasing a desire. And you can't love and desire for yourself at the same time. 99% of arguments about money in marriage come because one person's, at least one person, if not both, are craving something, desiring something. And they can't love someone while desiring something at the same time. Real talk for a second. Can I just step into it? Nobody said yes. I'm still going to step into it. Okay. 99% of arguments about sex and marriage come because at least one person is chasing a craving or desire and not actually pursuing love. And you can't simultaneously crave and love. This is why, we'll shift gears, this is why bullying continues to be a problem, particularly in our schools. And it's not because of schools. It's because for decades, we have taught our kids, and listen, it starts at home. For decades, we have taught our kids that their number one focus ought to be a love for themselves. And if they desire it, it must be right. And if they crave it, it must be healthy for them. And then they find themselves in an ecosystem with other kids and other students, and they can't find love for others who are different than them while simultaneously craving the things that they feel like are important to them. Just about every source of conflict that we experience in our world, you could look at this geopolitically. You could apply this to just about every arena of our world. Just about every area of conflict exists because at least one person or one group is chasing a craving. And you can't crave and love at the same time. The church at large experiences this at times. In fact, you've watched the church at large on times seem like it's chasing more of a craving, something that it wants, that it needs, that it desires, that it hopes for, and not loving. Because you can't crave and love at the same time. This is why throughout the course of this series, we've been talking about this. If you haven't been here, I'll catch you up. This is why throughout the course of this series, we're giving an opportunity for all of us to take a step to sacrifice our own cravings for the sake of loving. Or we're doing it through an initiative I shared with you last week, an initiative that we're calling For the Love. Really creative. Now, if you weren't here last week, let me fill you in on this real quick. Every year near the end of the year as a church, we do what we call a year-end generosity initiative. It's an opportunity for all of us to call this church our home, to take a step of generosity for the sake of something bigger than us and something beyond us. And here's the reason we pursue generosity, because at the heart of generosity is actually this choice to sacrifice things that I want for things that someone else needs. And financial generosity, just by the very fact that your and my finances are limited, put us in positions where we get to choose. Am I going to crave or pursue what I crave, or am I going to pursue love? And as a church this year, we're choosing to trade our cravings, or our love of ourself, in order to love three specific groups of people. We're looking to trade our cravings to love our neighbors, to love the church at large, not just our church, and to love the next generation. Now, if you weren't here last week, I'm going to fill you in really quickly. Now, I'm going to give you the high level if you weren't here last week, and I'll tell you this too, though, all the details of this are online at thec.church/forthelove. You can find all of it there. But if you weren't here last week, let me fill you in just so you're on the same page. Let's talk real quick about the love that we have for our neighbors and the way that we want to take a step of love for our neighbors. There's 3 specific organizations that we want to partner with and invest in before the end of the year. All of these are organizations that we've actually served with at GOMAD, if you've been here for GOMAD, but now we want to go beyond just serving with our time and actually invest in them financially. One of those is a group called Family Pathways. We provide this every year, Christmas meals to about 150 families in our community who otherwise would not have a nice meal on Christmas morning. And we just feel like every family in our community ought to wake up Christmas morning with a meal that they enjoy, and we want to make sure that happens. And we get a list from them every year. This year it's 150 families who are neighbors for us who will not have a great Christmas meal without us. And we said, hey, we want to do something about that. Another organization is Rangers Supporting Rangers. These guys do a phenomenal job. They basically tackle food insecurity, among other things, but one of the main things is food insecurity among students in our local school district. Students who go home and get to home on Friday night and they don't have a school meal at the school cafeteria on Saturday or Sunday because the schools are closed. And they make sure that those kids have food security through the weekend, every weekend. The last one is a group called the 156 Club. This is actually a facility that houses and provides space for about 25 to 30 recovery support groups every single week in our community. It's literally, you drive within a quarter mile of it every week, I almost guarantee you. What's just funny about this one, the plan was kind of to keep these, especially these last 2, kind of a secret, and then just like turn around at the beginning of the year and go to them and say, hey, we just wanted to invest in you. We love what you're doing. And then last week, I shared this with you guys, and someone came up to me in the lobby, and they're like, hey, I'm on the board of the 156 Club. This would be amazing. Let me tell you the difference that this would make for us. And I went, well, secret's blown, but I'm really glad that you're this excited because that makes me even more excited about being able to partner with and invest in you. So these are the ways that we want to show love to our neighbors between now and the end of the year. The second group we want to show love to is the church, specifically the church at large, the church here, near, and far, right? The church here at the Co, near to us in our region, and far around the world. So specifically, when we talk about the church here, we're talking about strengthening our ministry fund. This is something that we do at the end of every single year. And you know this probably if you've been around nonprofits or churches at all. Every nonprofit encounters this, right? There's a significant portion of our operating funds that come in at the end of the year through year-end giving that actually put us in a position to be able to start the next year strong and not have to wonder, are we going to be able to do this? Are we going to have to do that? Are we going to have to cut back that? Are we going to have to trim back this? And so in the same way that we do every year, we want to end the year strong, to be able to start the year strong, to continue creating spaces like the weekend, which you heard about a little bit ago with our high schoolers, to continue providing things like weekend services, where so many of you invite friends to experience Jesus every single week, to be able to do everything that we do here. We want to be able to start the year strong by ending the year strong, and that's where we're investing in loving the local church here. But also we want to invest in the church near through Converge Church Planting. I'll talk about that in a second. And then far with our Big Family Church, which is our church that we actually helped plant about 20 years ago in Ukraine. And actually things in Ukraine have shifted, as you can imagine, significantly over the last several years. And we actually have an opportunity to provide that church with solar panels that will make sure that they have a stable source of electricity, regardless of the day, time, regardless of whether the grid goes down, which it's going down more and more and more. And this church has turned into like a 7-day-a-week social good humanitarian organization serving their community every single day, food, resources, whatever is needed, because of the devastation that's happening in their community because of the war in Ukraine. And we just want to go, man, we want you to be able to keep going regardless of what the power grid does. And this is an opportunity for us to help them keep on going. Now, let's talk about this for a second, because this is fun. You might ask, and this would be a natural question to ask, right? I could even ask this question. Why would we invest in church planting when our church kind of feels like a church plant? I mean, we can't even baptize people in our own sanctuary. You know what I mean? Like, we got to go in the lobby with a cow trough. So you might go, hey, like, why would we invest in another church when we're still, when we feel like a church plant as well? And I think that's a normal, understandable question. I just say this if you're asking, or maybe now you are asking, I think it's easy to forget, and I can forget this sometimes, that not every town in our region has a church like ours. In fact, a significant number of towns in our region do not have a church like ours that is focused on the community, that is focused on loving their world close by well, and is focused on creating a space for people who are disconnected from a relationship with Jesus to come and experience a relationship with him. And the reality is, when you study the New Testament, you hear about all these churches. You read Paul write to these churches, John write to these churches. Every church you read about in the New Testament was a church plant. Many of them were younger than our church, and all of them were smaller than our church. And yet you just read about them continuously investing in God's ever-expanding, ever-multiplying church, sending resources to this city and that city to support what was happening through the local church in each of those communities. And I'll say this, if we wait until we feel fully established as a church here to be a part of God's ever-expanding, ever-multiplying church in other communities, we'll never do it. Because my hope is that we actually never feel fully established here. In fact, I hope there's never a day where you walk in and don't say, this kind of feels like a church plant. That we would always feel like we're moving and running and doing everything we possibly can to reach the next person and introduce them to Jesus. That we would constantly be agile and shifting and going, what's the next opportunity? What's the next difference that we can make? And I've just found over years of serving with different churches and being a part of different communities that if we wait until we feel ready to do this, we're never going to do it. And yet no church is ever fully ready to do it. And I feel like we have an opportunity and an invitation to be a part of God's church that is always growing, always multiplying, always expanding, always looking to resource the next community that needs another church that's focused on introducing more people to Jesus. So that's why we're investing in not just 2, but 3 spaces here, near and far. Now, the last space that we want to invest in, and the other last place or group of people that we want to love, is what we've said we want to show love to the next generation, particularly the next generation of our church that we're raising up to carry our church in the future. And in fact, there's going to be a day where none of us are here anymore. There's a whole new group of people who are here, and we want to begin investing in that generation now to prepare them to carry forward the mission that we've been given. There's 2 ways we want to invest in the next generation between now and the end of the year. The first one is through an upgraded youth space. Really, and if you were here last week, you heard me talk about this. So our youth right now, just like we meet in a portable space that we don't own, our youth meets on Wednesday nights in a portable space that we don't own. Particularly, they meet in the Forest Lake, I have to say this right, it's a lot of words, Forest Lake Senior Community Center, okay? Not the Forest Lake Senior High Community Center, the Forest Lake Senior Community Center. It's a space that was designed really well for seniors, but it's a space that our students take over every Wednesday night and blow the walls off and just fill it and pack it and engage with incredible life-changing conversations in small groups and in their service as well. And when you look at that space, you walk in and you go, this feels like a space that wasn't designed for our students, that we're making work for our students, because it is. And I feel like our students deserve a space that feels like it was built and designed and created for them, or at least a space that when they walk in feels like, hey, somebody thought of us, created this space for us, and I'm actually, if you're there for the first time, I'm actually in the right space. I didn't just walk into a knitting club. You know what I mean? Like this is where I'm supposed to be. A space that's welcoming, a space that's invitable, a space that's inviting, right? That helps our students feel fully at home. And so we want to invest in a space like that for them at that community center. And the things that we're investing in there are actually things that no matter where we were, whether we were portable or permanent, anywhere we were, they're things that we could actually take with us into any space that our students are calling home. Now, the last way we want to invest in the next generation is through Mega Sports Camp scholarships. If you've been around, you've heard about Mega Sports Camp over the summer. If not, you'll hear about it this summer, but Mega Sports Camp is one of the best things that we do as a church to create space for our families, our kids, and also new families and kids. In fact, a significant number of new families have engaged with our church because of Mega Sports Camp. We found that 50% of every families that show up to Mega Sports Camp for the first time show up to a Sunday morning at the Co for the first time. And one of the ways that we've done this is by making sure that every single student or every single kid can come regardless of income. And also, We provide it with a scholarship to every family that does not call this church their home as a way of saying, hey, we think you're going to love it so much that you're going to want to call this church your home. Last year, we actually raised funds for our scholarship fund during our year-end giving or generosity initiative. And it was great. And then this year came around, and we had twice as many new families as we had raised scholarships for. And so we want to double our scholarship fund going into next year so that we can continue to provide for those families that we're reaching and engaging through Mega Sports Camp. Now, that's a lot of things. And that's a lot of projects. And you might be wondering, is all of this possible? Like, can we actually do all of these things? To which I would say, I believe we can, if we're intentional. So let me tell you about two goals that we have for this initiative, okay? I'm going to tell you about this. If you were here last week, you already know this. You can help me out, actually. But if you weren't here, I'm going to tell you about the second goal first, because the second goal is the one that you're probably asking about in your mind right now, which is, hey, financially, how much do we need to raise to be able to show love in all of these ways? And so some of you were here last week, so maybe just say it with me if you were here last week. Our goal financially for this initiative is $100,000. And let me say this, that's beyond our typical and regular monthly giving. So if this is your church, your home, and you're investing and engaging regularly on a monthly basis, like Emily and I do every single month, right? This is not, don't divert that giving. You know what I mean? This is in addition to that, right? And like every year, we're asking you to be a part of this with us in a specific, in a special way. We would call these like a special offering. It's kind of the ways that some churches would term this, right? At the end of the year. And I'll be honest with you, that feels like a stretch for some of us. But I really do think it's possible if every one of us who calls this church their home takes a step of love, and particularly generosity motivated by love, to engage with and care for and love our community. Now, that's the second goal, but I told you the second goal first because that's the one you have the biggest questions about, okay? And you can find, if you want to see how that breaks down, all of that is available online, okay? But the first goal that I'll tell you about second is what I call our primary goal or our family goal. Honestly, this is the goal that I actually care about. If we don't hit that goal, it's okay. But the goal that matters most to me is what we call a family goal. And our family goal is that everyone who calls this church their home or considers himself a part of this church family, that 100% of us would participate in this together. That together we would make one massive expression of love for the sake of the world around us. And that together our church would be known for one thing communally and collectively as we take that step together, that we would be known for the love that we show to the world around us. And so my ask of you is that regardless of what generous is for you, because generous is a different definition. If we talk about numbers, it's different for all of us. But regardless of what that means for you, that all of us who call this church or their home, that we together would take a step of generosity together, which is something that you can do as soon as today, because For the Love opens today. Now, let me say this before you start reaching for your phones and your wallets, because I know you're just like ready to go, you know? I'm kidding. I want to say this to you, though. This is something that I'm going to bet that no pastor has ever said to you before, okay? Don't give. I mean it. Don't give. At least don't give without love. Like the worst thing in my mind that could happen is that we as a church would take a financial step of generosity without actually taking a spiritual step in our own hearts. And if we do that, man, we're going to miss the entire point of all this. In fact, we could blow that financial goal out of the water and not actually do it from a position and a place of love, or do it in a way that actually grows our hearts to love more. And we would celebrate the number, but man, we would miss everything that I truly believe that God actually has for us. Because most of all, I think God wants to transform our motivations through this process. The greatest thing that he wants to do in us is actually expand our capacity to love our world. In fact, I love the way that the Apostle Paul wrote this one time in one of his letters to the church in Corinth. Paul said this. He said, listen, if I gave everything that I have, I mean, like literally all of it, if I emptied my bank account to the poor, and even sacrificed my own body, like I just give, like literally every physical piece of me, I just gave all of me to it. He said, I could boast about it. I could celebrate it. We could cheer and clap for it. He says, but if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing in the process. If I didn't actually let my heart expand for the people that I was giving to, I would have gotten nothing through it. Listen, this isn't about giving. This is about love and generosity. And here's the difference. The difference between giving and generosity is motivation. Listen, there are a lot of reasons that you could give. Okay? There's a lot of reasons people do give. We give out of pride. I can give. We get out of shame and guilt. And some of us have sat in churches and we've given out of shame and guilt. I have to give. We can give out of habit. I've been guilty of this one for sure. Right? We get in a habit of like giving and we say like giving is just something, it's just what I do. And we actually are on autopilot and we're not actually thinking about the spiritual components of it. We're just kind of in the habit of doing it. There's a lot of reasons that you can give, but generosity is motivated by one thing. And my hope is that between now and the end of the year, that our generosity would be motivated by one thing. That we would be motivated by love. We pray for us before we wrap up. Jesus, I thank you for the ways that you continue to remind us that we were called to live and operate and think and process things differently than those around us. God, will we be the kind of people who are honest with ourselves about the things that we long for, who hear from you about the things that our hearts are wrestling with? God, would you use this as a season for each of us to really process our own motivations and the things that we care about? And God, would you help us to be a people, a community, a church that is known most for one thing, for our love. So God, as we all process what that looks like for us and how you may call us to be a part of that, how you might invite us to show love, specifically between now and the end of the year, God, would you really lead us to do the soul work within us? Would you help us to examine and process the things that we love most, and the things that you invite us to love most? God, would this be a season where we collectively, together, take a step closer to the things that you truly love the most? And God, would you use us as we do that to engage with and invite more and more people to experience your love? Jesus, we thank you for the opportunity you give us to be a part of what you're doing in our world. It's in your name we pray. Amen.